All right, welcome everyone to Lessons Learned from a Jamf Connect deployment with Andrew Grafe. Please, as you are watching the presentation, if you have questions, please make sure to open up the JNUC app and go to the session Q&A portion and submit your questions. If you see one that you're interested in, make sure to upvote it because that's the order that will go in after the presentation. If you haven't submitted a question yet, you may need to quit and relaunch the app, but otherwise, you should be good to go. So I will hand it off to Andrew.
Well, hello there. My name is Andrew Grafe. I'm a senior sys engineer at Sprinklr, technically for all things endpoint. Usually the first question I get when I introduce myself is, what is Sprinklr? Where I live, there is a Sprinklr company called Sprinklr that produces Sprinklr systems, which is not what I do. Sprinklr is a company focused on the customer experience. Sprinklr's main strength is helping companies connect to their users by gathering data from the multiple social media channels and presenting that in a unified platform. That is the only thing I'm going to talk to you about Sprinklr, what they do. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not selling you on their products. What is this session about? We're obviously going to cover Jamf Connect, since that's in the title, but it's not going to be a technical session. I'm not going to read the Jamf Connect documentation to you. That's boring, and they did a very good job of explaining all the things. I'm also not going to talk to you about profile settings. I'm not going to go to individual detail. Again, your deployment's going to vary, and obviously the Jamf Connect documentation is very well done. What I am going to talk to you about is our global deployment strategy. We deployed to 4,000 devices across the globe, global deployment strategy, obviously, with multiple OSs. We're going to talk about our successes and failures in that. We're also going to talk about it in the lens of a fix it, don't complain. Now, a lot of companies have core values. One of Sprinklr's core values is fix it, don't complain. We encountered a lot of issues during this deployment, and we had a lot of opportunities to practice fixing it. Now, I complained a lot, so I can't say I did all of it, but we did a lot of fixing. So before we get too far into the presentation, let's talk about the landscape. What are we deploying to? So let's get this out of the way. What is Jamf Connect? For those who are in this presentation, you should probably know what Jamf Connect is, so I'm going to set a baseline. Jamf Connect is an app that allows administrators to manage authentication by connecting a user's local macOS account to the organization's cloud identity, i.e. network accounts. I know I said I wouldn't read from the documentation. I promise this is the only time I'm going to do it. Let's talk about what we're deploying to. Sprinklr's technical history. So Sprinklr was founded in 2009. It had its IPO in 2021. For those who are very good at math, that's 12 years of privatization. So Sprinklr was a private startup that had different priorities when it was private versus public. Some of those changes you'll see in like our assets. It was okay when you were a private company to say our assets went to the recycler. Now we need a certificate of destruction or erasure. We had audits now, a lot more heavily focused audits, such as, hey, you guys can say that you're secure, but you need to actually present the evidence to us so that we can say you're secure. So saying you're secure is great. Having a certificate that says you are secure is way better. From its founding till 2022, users were admins. So the Jamf Connect deployment, which is what we're going to talk about here, removed admin rights, which is obviously going to be something we're going to talk about a lot. So before, devices were relatively low touch for IT. Again, if we needed someone to upgrade their OS, we just send out an email and say, upgrade your OS. However, as you've probably been into all the software update conversations that's been happening at JNUC, you realize one does not simply send out an email to say, upgrade your OS. You'll need something like a carrot and a stick. So we used Nudge before. We used Nudge a little bit in this presentation as well, in this deployment. But afterwards, we had to come up with a mechanism to do that. We're not going to talk about that, but we'll get there later on. The other thing we're doing at this point is we're switching our IDPs. We're currently with Google. We moved to Microsoft during this time. So let me talk to you about the context. Why are we using Jamf Connect? Sprinklr was evolving its IT and security practices, and the business decided to invest in a complex set of security enhancements, including rolling back local admin rights on employee devices. The solution, spoiler, it's Jamf Connect. So I'm going to kind of go through what we were doing before and after here. Before Jamf Connect, we had local accounts with no sync. So the user set their account one time during the pre-stage, done. No one's checking those passwords. If that device leaves the company, we can't stop them, right? They can still log in. After Jamf Connect, the local accounts were connected to Azure, Entra, Identity, whatever Microsoft is calling that product these days. I'm sure it's going to switch by the time we're done with this presentation. Before Jamf Connect, all users were admins. After Jamf Connect, users were demoted to standard accounts. And continuing with the trend, before Jamf Connect, users were logging in again with local password of no MFA. After Jamf Connect, users were logging in with their local password, which was syncing to, again, Azure Entra identity with MFA. So now that we got the context and the objectives out of the way, let's talk about the journey. How did we go from this scratchy handwriting in OneNote to this really well-designed, amazing diagram? I made it myself, that's why I'm complimenting it, on the right there. So we had to make some planning documents. Our design document, which is the first one, was heavily based on the Jamf Connect documentation. I focused on the setup of Jamf Connect and not the deployment. Spoiler alert, that was a mistake. Was effective for the first week and obviously the setup. But there's a famous Mike Tyson quote out there, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. This deployment punched me in the face multiple times and my plans have fallen through. I've also created a bunch of deployment diagrams, which is what you saw on the previous slide. We use those to capture every change in the process, and it was very helpful in walking through the deployment process with the support team, and as a reference for myself when encountering issues. Nothing like trying to troubleshoot something at 1 a.m. and trying to remember how you set something up. Pulling up that diagram makes it so much easier. We also highlighted specific issues in documentation. During the initial planning stages, we highlighted potential issues and developed supporting documents for these issues. The two main ones were, again, could just be admin rights. So we created something called the admin rights removal document. This was a list of all features and items that were affected when admin rights went away and also listed potential fixes. Now, I didn't create that document myself. I used a Jamf Nation thread, which had everyone else did all the hard work of here's all the things that users complained about. But we also kind of lived the life. We did 2 weeks before we did the deployment, our first deployment, where we ourselves were standard users. So we got to experience the pain and the joy of not having admin rights. We also created an app catalog because, the number one thing that people are going to ask for is apps now that they can't install them themselves. So we created something called the matrix. It stands for something. I don't have the time to explain all the letters, but it was a list of all our applications. IT reviewed the catalog and made sure that the highly used apps were available in self-service. Now, for every project, you should probably identify risk. And for Jamf Connect, our main risks were, one, a timeline complication. The company was changing IDPs and adding multi-factor authentication. Those were going to cause some end users issues. We couldn't always turn them on because we also had to deal with blackout dates, especially for finance when they're having to do their numbers, or engineering when they're rolling out a new product. The other thing that's going to be factoring in here for our risk is shadow IT. We're taking away admin rights. Guess what happens when you take away admin rights? There's a lot of mission-critical apps that were not procured during the current process, and they're all needed to be installed right away. So you're going to find out a lot about shadow IT really quickly. You're also going to see some change fatigue. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to go through multiple ongoing projects, and you'll understand why our end users are going to see change fatigue. But this not only affects them, but also affects us because we have to support all the projects ongoing at the same time. And here's our ongoing projects. So originally, I told you we're switching our Google IDP to Microsoft IDP. Kind of lied. We're switching our Google tech stack to our Microsoft tech stack. The Google IDP and the Microsoft IDP happened first, but yes, that is ongoing at the same time as this project. We're also doing Intune enrollment, which is, once we're on Microsoft, that's something you can do. We're adding a naming convention, which really doesn't affect the end users, but it's something we're going to mention later, so I figured I'd put it onto the other projects. And we're also doing some app blocking. We're doing IM blocking with Jamf restricted software and personal webmail blocking with MDE. So those are the ongoing projects. Let's talk about our strategy. Sprinklr's strategy was breaking devices down into waves. Waves were broken down by department and org unit. So our first wave was the beta wave, which was 56 devices. Waves 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 combined together equal to 200 devices. Waves 6, 7, 8 were about 300 to 500 devices per wave. Now, for those who are good at math, you realize that's not 4,000 endpoints. Well, wave 6 was 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, same thing with 7, etc. We also defined out our success tracking. So how do we know wave 1 was successful? How do we know wave 2 was successful? Here's the things we were looking at. One was admin users. This was based on EA to get both the count of admin users and who still had admin rights. So admin users, EA would return the users on the machine that still had admin rights. The admin account returned how many accounts that had admin rights. Remember, they had 13 years of admin rights. Some of those users were migrating admin accounts onto their new machines, and then they would migrate again, and then again. And then they would have 6 admin accounts with their name and a number behind it. That's not good, right? We also tracked name change. Name change was part of the Jamf Connect rollout. So what we were doing with the name change was your device's name would be based off of the UPN stored in the Jamf Connect plist. We just split off the, for us at Sprinklr.com, that's your name. So we did Andrew.Grafe -serial number. So if you saw Andrew's MacBook, you know, hey, that guy doesn't have Jamf Connect, there's something going wrong. And then finally, the most obvious thing we used to track was the Jamf Connect login extension attribute, which captures the most recent login data from Jamf Connect. So let's talk about the beta wave. This was our first wave. Users in this wave were IT support and security. That's right, we dog food. So the strategy here was to deploy profiles to all devices in the wave. Now, feedback and issues would be posted in our Slack channel. And of course, the date of the release was conveniently the same time as JNUC. That's right, I was at JNUC when they decided to roll out this process. Great timing, right? If you saw me, I was either trying to get free swag or at the Jamf help bar getting support for my Jamf Connect rollout. I thought this was cursed, and it probably was cursed, but it came in a blessing in disguise because I got punched in the face. And this is what I got punched with. Users received a password complexity prompt. The new password must contain at least one number and one alphabetic character. Now, having any complexity was an issue for us since we did not create a complexity in Microsoft. So users were creating accounts, and they didn't have one number or one alphabetic character in it. Obviously, they probably had alphabetic characters, not the numbers, but I digress. Having any complexity was an issue, because again, we didn't create that, and so we removed the requirement profile to remove this issue, we thought. Except that profile acts like a stamp. It stamps the complexity onto the machine. And then when you remove that stamp, guess what? The ink is still there. So I went to the help bar, talked to Ben, who's awesome, who gave us a working script. In less than 12 hours, we had this resolved. A quote from my boss: "I already consider your trip to JNUC worth it since you got the commands needed to fix and solve a very annoying issue. Trust me, I will be showing this to him every time I want to register for JNUC." Just give me a second here, I'm super dry. So, every wave I'm going to capture kind of feedback. And there's the big three feedback we're going to see is admin rights, lockouts, and MDM binary remediations. We're going to talk about admin rights on this slide, but the other two we're going to talk about later on. So, admin rights. Despite the admin rights issue documentation, two things stood out from the pack as issues. One is Squirrel. If anyone knows what Squirrel is, you're probably already internally groaning about it. Squirrel is an OS X framework focused on making application updates as safe and transparent as updates to a website. That makes no sense to me. I still don't really understand it. I've read it like 20 times. What it does do is it pops a little prompt there that says Slack is trying to add a new helper tool. So in my world, what that means is, hey, Slack is checking to see does that person have admin rights or permissions to read write the app and install the helper. If it does, don't prompt this. If it doesn't, prompt this. Well, Slack is a highly used app in Sprinklr. It was our #1 used app, and that got really annoying real quick because no one had admin rights. Some apps, you can turn it off, which Slack could. We turned that off by wave 2. You can also turn it off for the entire computer. However, that breaks Discord. You can also get users permissions to access the apps themselves and update, but that's not great for multiple user machines. So if you have a lab environment, who gets the read-write rights to that app? Everyone? That's crazy. It's also very bad practice. If you want to read a real controversial thread, go to the Mac Squirrel GitHub and go to the issues, and you'll find the who's who of Mac admins complain about this feature. There's also a temporary fix, which is clicking cancel. Granted, depending on how it's implemented, Squirrel might pop up again and be super annoying. The other admin rights thing, which we knew about, but we weren't aware how many people were using, was sudo rights. Because again, when everyone has admin rights, you're not being aware of who and what is using sudo. So I know that sudo's file exists. However, we found at Sprinklr, almost everyone who's using sudo is also needing something for admin rights. I need to modify my host file, but I also need to upgrade this app, downgrade this app, added this app to this, and do all this weird stuff. Yeah, we're not going to do that. We'll just give you the admin rights, and we'll just put you in our very close monitoring program for those who are using admin rights. Now, I already talked to you about the password complexity prompts, which was one of the feedbacks we got, but we also realized we need better communication. Users thought that Jamf Connect prompt was malware and viruses, and this is coming from our security team. That's not good, right? Because our security team is flagging that. Imagine our end users are flagging that. End users were attempting to remove Jamf Connect. They were trying to get rid of it. That's right, they didn't lose their admin rights until after they sign in, so they were trying to kill it as much as they possibly could. So that's kind of a compliment to Jamf to how good that install is, and they couldn't do it. And then they were also restarting the computer, creating lockouts, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So this leads us to wave 1, and this is kind of the diagram of how I've deployed wave 1. It's a profile deployment with an end-user support channel. Feedback, again, our big 3, admin rights, MDM binary issues, and lockouts. So this is the time we talk about lockouts. A lockout occurs if a user has restarted their device and can no longer get past the file vault login screen. This could occur if the user ignores the Jamf Connect prompt and restarts the machine. I'm going to make an awkward pause here for a second. That way everyone's paying attention. Jamf Connect has resolved this issue in 2.21. I'm just making sure you're clear. So this is not a occurring problem if you're going to roll out Jamf Connect tomorrow. Unless you're rolling out an older version of Jamf Connect, well, that's your problem for sure. But when we rolled out Jamf Connect, it was 2.14, 2.16, and 2.18. We did it over a 6-month period, so we didn't get this nice little feature, which caused a bunch of lockouts. This could also occur if the end user forgets their local password. That's universal. That no matter what version of Jamf Connect you're going to use, that is something that you will have to deal with if the user forgets their local password. Now, I'm going to walk you through the recovery process. It can take anywhere between 20 to 40 minutes to remediate, depending on the technical skill of the end user and the IT person involved, right? And also remember, the end user can't share their screen at this point. So you're going to get a lot of phone calls where they're trying to show you the screen, type in the password, type in a recovery key, and it's going to be awful for you. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat. So for those who are not familiar with recovering a local account, I'll just walk you through the process real quick. You boot into recovery mode. You give them the recovery key, you pray that the recovery key is in Jamf, and then you reset the password and you reboot. A couple other things to note. Our internal support team was presenting a lot of feedback to us about this rollout. While it's easy to blame the support team for lack of good troubleshooting and support on the rollout, we failed to give them proper direction and support for the deployment. The support team was also fielding constant requests on the Microsoft migration and other large projects as well as the traditional support issues. And this is where our lesson 1 comes out. Bite off what you can chew. At this point in deployment, we should have realized we were doing way too many things at once. Wave 2. That's right, we'll just keep moving on the misery right here. All right, so strategy. We're doing a deployment to the profile of all devices in this wave. Again, this diagram is the same as wave 1. We didn't do any changes technically there. We still have our Slack channel. But we added a new internal support channel so that our support team felt supported from the engineering team. They can now raise issues to us, and we would be responsive in theory, right? We also added daily stand-ups. I know no one groaned it audibly, but internally we all kind of groaned at the word stand-ups because those stink, right? But this truly helped. That meant no one was locked out for more than 24 hours. Issues were escalated. The support team felt heard, which was very important because the support team needs to support us and also support the end users. It also helped prioritize issues correctly. So outside of the normal big 3 feedback, we saw a couple issues that our end users had. So one was Microsoft account issues, and it was not their fault. They forgot their passwords. So, like I said before, we are switching our Google IDP to Microsoft IDP. Problem is, we did this 6 weeks before we rolled out Jamf Connect. Our users, being very good users, they got an email that said, hey, we're setting up Microsoft IDP. Please create an account. Oh, those great users, they did it right away. And then realized 99% of the tooling is still in Google. They have no reason to log into Microsoft. Now, our good users, they're very secure too, they realize, you know what, when I create a new password, it should be different from my Google password because I'm secure and I'm a good employee and I'm going to do it right away. But I won't put it in a password manager. So when we pop up a box that says, please log into your Microsoft username and password, they don't know it. That's not good. Not good at all. And then they'll forget that they have that. They'll put the Chrome browser up. Oh, crap, I have an issue. Let me restart, lockout. Not good at all for all of us. So we updated our comms. We said, hey, make sure you know your office.com password, because that's easier to say than say Microsoft account. And they kind of resolved that themselves. Also, on any of our troubleshooting steps, there'll be a little step that says, hey, confirm with the end user that they know their office.com password. If not, reset their account for them, please. The other thing we saw was blank screen at login. The problem was at the time when we rolled out Jamf Connect, our EDR was flagging Jamf Connect as a problem child. Restart, refresh would fix it. Now we still see this issue every once in a while, but usually it's because they're on poor Wi-Fi. I kid you not, someone called me and said, hey, I can't get into Jamf Connect. I'm looking, I'm like, can you show me your Wi-Fi screen? They're at MGM Resort, guest Wi-Fi. Yeah, that's not good enough for Jamf Connect. So wave 3, this was my hardest wave. Most of my day was spent on lockouts, wake up lockouts, right? It was a great time. Devices from this wave of 1 or 2 would restart and lock themselves out. So the strategy again is our support channels. We added 2 new people at this point in the wave. We added 2 contractors for full-time help on Mac and PC issues. That's right, we were doing the PC side at the same time. So again, bite off what you can chew. We weren't doing that. And we also increased our training, right? So you can see on the right there, there is a Jamf Connect troubleshooting tree. This is the diagram on the slide. The support team could utilize this documentation to quickly find steps for resolution. It also made my life easier. I could just say, see step 8. And then when they don't succeed, I can say, you did not read step 8, read step 8, right? We also transitioned from a profile deployment to a policy deployment, kind of. Now, we kind of were set with profile. Profile is going to be the way we deploy Jamf Connect. The problem is users can't opt into a profile deployment. When we say, hey, Wednesday we're deploying the profile, Wednesday you got the profile. That's not great, because Wednesday at what time? We have people in India. I'm deploying it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for me. That's not great for India when they wake up and immediately get a profile and then immediately get Jamf Connect to pop up, and then they have 20 meetings and they forget about restart lockout, right? So we entered this profile, this policy stage, and we're using something called the Jamf Connect assets. So for those familiar with Jamf Connect, you might want to do your special branding. For us, we have our Sprinklr burst, which is our logo, our Sprinklr background. We deploy that as a PKG, as a policy. Before this, we were just deploying it willy-nilly. We didn't care. We just deployed it to all devices that were being targeted. In Wave 3, we made that a policy that the users can opt in on. So it would be available on Wednesday. The users click install. They install the assets. And then we would have an EA that would say, hey, those assets were installed. Go ahead and put them in the smart group. Deploy the profile via the smart group. It's great. So just kind of reiterate, a quick walkthrough. User clicks on the Jamf Connect policy install. It recons. The extension attribute tracks the installation and adds the device to the deployment smart group. Users who have installed the assets then get the profile. Just making sure we're fully clear. This allows us to do a self-service notification. Now, Kevin and Superman made a very key point. No one cares about those notifications, and that's absolutely true. No one sees them. They ignore them. There's 20 million of them. If you're using Jack, a Jamf app catalog, there's millions of these now. They ignore them. But they won't ignore the management action, which happens on the following day. So on Wednesday, we would deploy the self-service notification. On Thursday, we deploy the management action policy. They have 1 day to defer, and they can't ignore that. So on Friday, they will get the profile. So let's talk about the last of our big 3 feedbacks, which is the MDM binary issues. Now, we're all here. We're all Jamf admins in some way or form. We all have experience with Jamf. You probably are familiar with these symptoms. These are not new. If they are new, wow, you live in a great environment, right? So the symptoms of an MDM binary issue is the policy would not install. The policy was not in self-service. There's no self-service on the device. The profile will not deploy to the device. The device is not in Jamf. If the device is not in Jamf, you're going to have a hard time deploying it through Jamf. To remediate these issues, I created the Jamf MDM binary remediation tree, which, because I was on a roll with the Jamf Connect remediation tree, I just made another one. But this helped a lot too, but the remediations are everywhere. They could take anywhere from a day or 2 for people to work on. So we have this every single wave, despite the fact that we are actively troubleshooting them. And this brings us to our 3rd lesson, which is have a strong direction. Both my project manager and my manager saw this project was at risk and took active steps to help reduce this workload. You saw that when they hired 2 new contractors to help out. So wave 4 and 5, these waves are combined to just the size of wave 5, which was 14 devices. The only thing to really highlight here was this our first change, like a large change in our communication strategy. For each wave before wave 5, we were doing individual Slack channels. That meant we just added people to the Slack channels, and they knew that this channel was for Jamf Connect issues. However, when you get to 304 devices, or 304 users in a wave, those channels become kind of useless because there's lots of crosstalk. People leave, and you're sending comms in that channel. It's not a good strategy. So, plus, as we're doing more and more communication with our end users, we now have to direct them to the right channel. It was easier just to do one generic. So there's some pros and cons to switching from an individual channel for each wave to just one large channel for all deployment. The other thing to highlight here was we had better trained staff. The new hires in Wave 3 are starting to handle the simple requests and issues, creating breathing room for myself and the IT support team. Let's be honest. Bringing contractors in on Wave 3, useless. Absolutely useless. They knew nothing about Jamf Connect. Wave 4, they started to get it. Wave 5, they handled those problems for us. That meant I didn't have to handle those problems. So wave 6.1 is our first big wave. It's 304 devices, and this was the second worst wave for me behind wave 3, just because it was a large wave. So we're still doing our JC asset strategy for deployment. We're still doing a forced deployment. We have that new Slack channel in for all our devices. The thing to highlight here really is that we realized, oh crap, Catalina users, oh, that's end of life. Oh boy, we don't have anything in place for people to update their machines without admin rights. We better make an exception for them. We better use Nudge. Hey, Andrew, do you know how to use Nudge? No. OK, I guess you got to figure it out in wave 6.1, right? So we got that ready to go. Obviously, there is the diagram for Nudge. And we were up like 50 at this point in this wave, and by the time we were done with 6.1, we were down to 20. And most of those were like, man, I'm running a 2009 MacBook. Can I run Monterey? No, you cannot. So the feedback from this wave outside the big three was the new user accounts. Users would accidentally create a new account instead of connecting their old accounts. The fix was to turn off new account creation in the profile. Now, for existing accounts that are already kind of messed up, it's sad that it happens to them, but it's kind of comical when you see the ticket come in and we're like, I logged into Jamf Connect and everything in my downloads folder is gone. All my bookmarks are gone. You're like, yeah, you kind of created a new account. So what you do is you have them log out, go to the screen. For us, we just had them turn off turn off Wi-Fi, have them log into local login to their old account, and then delete out the new account. Now, in the documentation, you'll see there's like 20 different things like, make sure this is their good account. Don't delete the good account. There's no recovery. Please don't do this. Right? We made sure that was very clear, but that's easier to fix than what the Jamf documentation tells you to fix. That's the one time I'll criticize Jamf documentation. I think deleting out the new account is way easier. So wave 6.2 and beyond. So 6.1 was the last wave where we had to make a major change moment. We had just too many lockouts, too many issues. The increase in size of wave 6.1 highlighted that an issue that only affected 10% devices in wave 3 is now affecting a larger amount of devices. Granted, that's how percentages work. Wave 6.2 was the last wave where IT made a major technical change or received any unique feedback from our end users. So we're still looking at the same strategy, same Slack channels, daily stand-ups, improved wave grouping. Let me kind of explain this. This is kind of three things rolled into one. One of the things I don't think we thought through but kind of helped us out was wave 6.2 and wave 6.1 were the same org. So the people in wave 6.2 were asking wave 6.1, hey, what's this Jamf Connect thing? What am I doing with this prompt? And hopefully the wave 6.1 people were saying, yeah, that's okay, just sign up your Microsoft account. Or they were saying, don't do it, it's taking away your admin rights. Either way, they were talking to each other. There was herd mentality happening there. So that was great. The other thing we realized we needed to do was separate our VIPs out of these waves. Trust me, there was a Sunday lockout that took 2 hours to remediate. Not a fun weekend for me, right? So separate your VIPs, make sure you give them the white glove treatment when you need to. We also realized we should probably exclude our users who are on PTO. Nothing is great than having a paternity leave and you come back, you miss an email that was sent 2 months ago about Jamf Connect, restart your device, and locked out. That also helped us out in reporting because our numbers were shooting up because all of these people are not connecting in with Jamf Connect. Well, they're out. They're not going to, right? So the other thing we did on this at this point was our seasoned IT team. We're talking about 8 weeks of Jamf Connect deployment. These guys were already rock stars. They're finally at that same level when it comes to Jamf Connect. Faster troubleshooting, faster response times, less on my plate, which allowed me to do some new crazy stuff. So we already talked about the JC asset self-service policy with notifications. I'm going to introduce you to the JC helper script, which is right below that. Here's what the script would do. It grabs the serial number from the device. It checks the API to see if that value for the Jamf Connect login attribute is on Jamf Pro. If there is no value, run the script. If there is a value, recon, stop running the script. So what does the script do? The Jamf Connect application was on the device. It would open it. Now, when we deployed Jamf Connect, this was the heyday of Monterey. Monterey has a problem with launch agents. Jamf Connect, when it's installed, is supposed to open up right away. It doesn't sometimes, which is not great because that creates lockouts. So what this does is, hey, if Jamf Connect's installed, we'll pop it up. If the end user sees the pop-up and puts their Chrome browser in front of it, pops it back up in front of that. So the script would then wait 60 seconds, then run a recon. The script would then check to see if the user had logged in successfully. Again, another check to the API. If there was no value, run the script again. If there was a value, run Jamf recon. On the third failed run, a prompt would appear by the Jamf Helper framework, and it would say, Jamf Connect has successfully installed on your device. However, we need you to complete the installation. Please review the instructions. If you do not, you may be locked out of your machine. If you have questions, reach out to IT. Users would then click OK, and then the instructions would appear in Chrome. Now, I'm going to walk you through this. We send out a Slack message to our end users. We send them an email. We sent something in the all-call meeting that we have once every 2 months. They get the self-service notification, which no one reads, but hey, we did it. We did a management action. We have Jamf Connect popping up. We then have a warning message that says, you don't do it, you'll be locked out. And then finally, when you click OK, it pops the instructions. That's 8 forms of communication in different methods to our end users. We still have lockouts. So the feedback from this wave, again, our MDM device binary issues, those don't go away. We're always going to have those. The admin rights, we're going to get the same feedback. I can't install this app. How do I install this app? Well, that app's not approved. We don't want you to install that, etc. Lockouts. Let's talk about lockouts. The JC Helper script worked. We were getting about 10 lockouts a day. It went down to about 2 lockouts a day. But that was not the only thing in play. Our ELT team and our SLT team, man, that's real fun to say. I should have practiced that a little bit more. SLT team had a competition. Non-nefarious, no one was getting fired, no one, nothing like that. But they were trying to see who could be 100% compliant the fastest. That worked great because that meant the people manager of 2 people was fully aware of what Jamf Connect was. And so when someone complains up the chain, every single person knew that that was the direction the company was going. Finally, let's talk about the cleanup. So deployment's done. A lot of our devices got it. We still had about 200 devices left over. And they fall into these kind of categories. One, the MDM binary remediation. There's just a lot of things that could go wrong with the MDM binary, and it's not fun to remediate. The other thing was PTO. We legitimately had someone out for the entire deployment. That was 6 months. It was crazy to me, but they had the very first issue we saw in the beta wave. For some reason, the beta wave fix did not get applied. Blew my mind. We had stale inventory records, which we need to do a better job at because our inventory records had data that said this device was checking in, but technically we sold it, and we didn't clear it out. So that was bringing our numbers down, right? We also had extension attribute issues. Again, the Jamf Connect extension attribute is great. It tracks the data well, but sometimes it produces a false negative. The user was using Jamf Connect the whole time. We didn't realize it. Finally, of course, how do we get our new devices set up? We put it in the new device setup. We added that to a pre-stage enrollment. We put the configuration profile there. We made sure the JC asset's there as well. So I call this session Lessons Learned from a Jamf Connect Deployment. What are those lessons? So obviously the first one is bite off what you can chew. Sprinklr was doing a lot of things at once. This split focus on multiple projects, creating a less than ideal experience for our end users and our IT team. Secondly, the lesson I accidentally skipped during this presentation, but now I'll get to it now. Learn the lessons quickly and do not be complacent. Sprinklr was constantly making changes each wave. I hope you at least saw that from this presentation. That's the only thing you pull away from it. An issue that occurred in the previous wave would be addressed with a fix or change in procedure in the following wave. This was not just occurring on the technical side, but also on the communication side. I don't want to bore you with here's what this email looked at for this wave. That would have been really sad. I didn't want to do that for you guys, but we definitely were making changes. Is this too long? Will our end users read this? The answer is no, but at least can we say that we gave them a chance? We are also using the lessons here on this wave in our Jamf Connect 2.0 stage. Do you guys remember the password complexity prompt in the beta wave? Guess what? We turned on password complexity. And for those who are not familiar how to reset your password with Jamf Connect, you open the Jamf Connect app, you hit reset password, you have to sign in with your IDP. Your IDP, you change your password to the complexity that we want, and then it gets synced to your local account, which is kind of how Jamf Connect works. And if you don't know your local password, you get locked out again. So we had a 27% error rate with this Jamf Connect rollout, the one I'm talking to you about now. Our new one had a 2% error rate. We started out at basically 8.0 for Jamf Connect 2. We had our Jamf Helper script ready. Our comms was on point. Our documentation was ready. And we started out with 2 contractors. We were fully prepared for that 20% error rate. Not happening this time. Also, finally, in the last lesson, probably the hardest one for anyone to actually enact from being below someone, right? having a strong direction. Knowing that the true objective of a project is going to make hard decisions easier. This means when end users push back, you can point to a known direction of the project. This is seen in project management. My project manager, she is awesome. I'm not saying her name because I don't want you guys to steal her from me. And also in our manager. My boss made sure we got help, made sure we weren't overwhelmed, and he made sure everyone was on board. But it's also seen in our senior leadership. Our CTO at the time was telling us not to be lenient on any one of admin rights. He literally said, take it away from everyone. Well, we can't really do that, but he did say that. So we knew that anytime the engineers complained, the CTO was on board. Hopefully some of these lessons will help you and in any future project you guys deploy. Thank you for listening.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Yep.
We've got a few questions here, and we've got about 10 minutes to run through them. So if you're ready, we can start out. So the first one is, what was the very close monitoring of admin rights, and how did you do that?
That is something our security team does, and
Okay.
so I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to really talk about that. But yes, they're monitoring who and what has admin rights. That's something that's audited once a month. It's a nice long process for us in that way.
All right. The next one, will you be sharing your slides? Is there a way that people could get them?
Sure, I'll share them. I don't care. They're not top secret.
All right. And what would be a good method for that, for people to get it? Come talk to you?
I'll put them somewhere, and then I'll share it in the JNUC Slack channel on the Mac Admins Forum.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So the next, sorry about that. The next one, did you have to deploy Connect to any shared devices? And if so, were there any issues specific to shared computers with multiple users?
Fortunately, no. Everyone is basically one-to-one, so we don't really have any shared use cases that I'm aware of. There has been discussion about loaners, but reality is we found that most people aren't using our loaner program, so it hasn't been a real big issue for us at this point.
Okay. All right. So then the next one we've got, if you could go back and tell your pre-deployment self one piece of advice about the rollout, what would it be?
Don't do it. No. So, let me think about that for a second. When you're doing a presentation, I'm thinking through what questions, and I figured that would be the one, and I'm kind of figuring out what would be the most important to me. And honestly, I would like to say the helper script was but I think was the really, and I hate to give credit to someone else because you want to be the credit by yourself, but it really I think was the ELT SLT buy-in. Like that competition didn't kick in right away, and that kicked in at the end, and that like you wouldn't get a random VP complaining about Jamf Connect anymore because that would be foolish because your C-level person above you is saying, no, you have to do this. We all agree to it. So we're all doing this, and you're like, yeah, that's way better than having that pressure. So having that ELT, SLT buy-in earlier would have been great. Or at least communicated better with them. That'd
Sure.
be better.
All right. So then the next one is going back to some of the early issues you experienced. When you say that they fixed meaning Jamf, fixed the file vault issue, what does Jamf Connect do differently now?
The file vault issue, you mean the lockout, probably?
I'm thinking that's maybe what they're referring to.
To be honest, I don't know what they exactly fixed. I do remember I jumped for joy when I saw that in the patch notes that you would no longer get locked out if you issued a new password command or something like that. And trust me, when I was doing Jamf Connect 2.0, again, we were trying to make that documentation tree because, again, we're trying to learn our lessons and not be complacent, right? I mean, practice what I preach. I mean, I just did a presentation on it, right? So I tried everything. I'm like, what if I just didn't sign in? Or what if I just put my username in and restart the device, like literally force restart the device? What could I do to break Jamf Connect? Doesn't break. I couldn't recreate the lockouts. I thought something was wrong with me because I was like, what am I? I can't fail at failing. Whatever they did, they fixed it. It was great. And the thing was, it was a known bug at the time because I remember talking to Ben about it. I'm like, what am I doing about these lockouts? And he's like, oh yeah, that's a known thing. So we did what we could do with what we had.
All right. This is an interesting one. All right. We are within they're all interesting, but.
This one's really good.
We are within 4 to 6 weeks from rolling out Jamf Connect. Do you recommend pausing this and waiting for Jamf 11?
No. I don't. They share the same name, but it's really just Jamf Pro is just the engine that gives it. It's the Jamf Connect. It's kind of its own separate product at this point, really, and you're just using Jamf Pro to deploy.
The next question, is that helper script available?
It can be. It's my script. It's garbage, but yeah, you can totally. There's no comments. It's just, yeah, I can make that available too. It's one of my few things I wrote myself. I didn't steal anyone else's code. I'm like super proud of it, and maybe I won't give it away. No, just kidding. It's totally fine.
Great. All right, so I just want to make a call out that there are quite a few questions left, and we've got about 4 minutes. So if there's something especially that you want to hear an answer to, please make sure you go ahead and upvote it.
I'm just surprised people stayed awake. Holy cow. I was expecting no questions.
We've still got 90 minutes until the bus to the party.
Oh, that's true. I could just stay here all night answering questions. That'd be fun.
All right, so our next one here. On the black or blank screen issue, how often did it occur, and could you touch on what that remediation was?
Yeah, sure. I probably went way too fast. Not a problem. Really, it's just restart, refresh, and then sometimes we found that, like, hey, disconnect from the Wi-Fi, reconnect to the Wi-Fi. Can you connect to a more secure Wi-Fi? Can you connect to a different Wi-Fi? Can you plug into Ethernet? Those are like the basic troubleshootings. I literally had one with the VP last week where I'm pretty sure it's his modem at home, but it's a very long battle to try to convince him it's his modem at home. He's like, all my other devices work fine. What's the other device? My iPhone. I'm like, are you sure you're not on cellular? I'm pretty sure. I'm like, oh yeah, but there's that fallback feature. I don't know if you're fully aware of it. And I'm like, there's a lot of, it's like you end up troubleshooting network issues, which I'm sure all of us are loving network issues and troubleshooting
It's
that.
never the network.
Yeah, it's never the network.
All right, this became a popular question. A year later, do you find that the rollout was worth it, and are you seeing the benefits of Jamf Connect?
Good question. So, the use case for Jamf Connect is from the security and IT team partnership. From my perspective, there is some outstanding issues that make my life a little bit more interesting, right? So, I'm going to make this about admin rights because that's how I feel about it, is that admin rights is a big undertaking. We planned for Jamf Connect pretty much just the Jamf Connect deployment. And again, we knew admin rights was going to be a big deal because I was screaming that admin rights is a big deal. Everyone acknowledged my screaming, and we still went with it. And that's not a problem. I'm not complaining about it. That is just how the business works. Sometimes you get overwritten, and sometimes you need to just suck it up and take it with as it is because you don't write your own checks. However, those admin right issues are still popping up constantly. We're literally doing super right now because people don't have admin rights. So how do we do OS updates? Super. How do we patch software? Well, Jamf App Catalog is great, but it was still kind of in beta when we originally deployed it out. Again, I'm not going to make fun of Jamf, but hey, that needs some notifications to our end users. We can't just quit apps. How does it quit apps? And now we're looking at like Installamator, but Installamator doesn't have all our catalog. So we have that issue too. How do we handle app approval? I don't know, but I'm not going to be the one that's making the call on everyone's individual apps. Like, that's not my job. So there's a lot of like, yes, I don't know what the question was. I just went on. I'm like, I could just go on and on about admin rights and how bad that is for us, but. I
think it's good to hear the types of things that you need to consider and balance out and just be warned. Be ready for. All right. I think we've got time for one last question here.
Better be a good one. It got to be an interesting one since you're calling them out like that.
I mean, it has 2 votes, so I'm going to go with that. Did you have Jamf Connect silently enable File Vault? And if so, how reliable has that been?
No. We did File Vault on a different profile before, so.
Okay. It's still separate now?
Yeah, it's still separate now, yeah.
Okay. So we'll have to find another use case to hear
Plus,
about
I'm really interested to see what the File Vault set up during pre-stage. That's going to change some things because that will hopefully make it a little bit more efficient.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. Yeah. Like I said, the party bus will be leaving from outside the expo hall or outside the convention center at 6. And then cycling through all night to get you there and back. So hope you all enjoy it, and see you all at the party.